Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned? Welcome to my show. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen. The Woman's Connection is a program about women who are helping women. Have you ever been told you were crazy because you said something out of the blue that you didn't even know where it came from? Or you didn't listen to your little voice in the back of your head that said to do something like go right instead of left, and you said, nah, you're not going to pay attention, only to say, why didn't I pay attention? Well, I've been in both places. Today our guest is Carol Bell Knight, who's going to tell us and how to help us to get self-confidence in listening to that little voice in the back of our head. Carol, welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you with us today.
Thanks very much. It's really joyful to be here.
Thank you. What have you been doing? Or let's start with, what are you doing presently?
Well, I'm enjoying a little relaxation in New York City, for one thing. I just got back from a long trip to Europe.
Oh, exciting.
I was gone a month. I was in Sweden and Switzerland doing seminars.
Oh, what kind of seminars?
Consciousness upliftment seminars. Sort of the thing that you were talking about right at the beginning, how people can listen more to the inner voice, how they can understand more of what they're hearing.
Sounds like something I should sign up for.
Right away. Everyone, I guess, would enjoy signing up for listening to that type of program. Actually, I listen a lot to the people who are present because they've all had their own experiences of intuition and understanding a different dimension of themselves. So that's what it's really about, and that's what I've been doing.
Sounds exciting. Now, how did you get into this?
It was an evolutionary process. I used to be a school teacher in Kansas. And
say the Wizard of Oz and all that.
Yeah, really. And I think my favorite line is, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Because I'm certainly not, although I love my homeland. But it was something that I kind of grew up with and didn't really know it was there. Oh. And every once in a while something would happen that would cause me to say, well, nobody else sees things that way. What's wrong with me? At first it used to be a what's wrong with me question, then I got past that.
Well, how did you get past that, what's wrong with me?
Well, I had a couple of very dramatic experiences. One, I used to have so-called invisible playmates, you know.
Oh.
And I thought everybody could see them because I could, and they would be out at the pond with me. You know, we watch pollywogs turn into frogs and all kinds of wonderful things like that, you know. And one afternoon, I decided to take them home for supper.
Oh, that must have been exciting.
Oh, yes, it was very exciting. We all ran up to the house, and my grandmother came to the door, and I said, Grandma, could my friends stay for supper? And she said, you know your friends are half a mile away. What an imagination you have, child. And they all vanished. Oh. And it was sort of startling because I saw them and Grandma didn't, you know. She said, you don't have any friends here. So I let that one pass by, and there were a lot of them like that. And then a very, very big dramatic experience happened. I was very deeply influenced by my grandfather, Knight. In fact, I carry his name, their name. And he took a disease called coal miner's disease at that time.
No, that's what the lungs...
Now, he was a farmer, but he was also in the coal mines of Kansas, the strip pits they call them. And he had been bedridden for quite a while, and I had a precognition of when he was going to die. And I told my family, you better be over at the house, you know, at Grandpa and Grandma's, because he's going to die. And, of course, that upset everybody.
I'm sure it did.
Because they all thought he was going to get well, you know. Well, he did die at the precise time I said he would, and everyone was there because they were afraid not to be. And he walked out of his physical body from the bedroom through the living room, and I was sitting there. And I was feeling very joyful because somehow intuitively I knew that he was over the pain.
How old were you at this time?
I was 16, 15 going on 16, yeah. And he said a few words to me from his spiritual body. And he said for me to go give my uncle a certain message about the family business, which I dutifully did.
But that spooked him out.
It really did. He got up and ran back in. He said, he's still alive, he's alive. And I said, yes, he's alive, but he's not in there. Well, that got me in serious trouble.
I bet it did.
Of course, my uncle said my mother should have something done about me, that I was really crazy, and my mother decided the only thing to do was have me have counseling. Well, we didn't have counselors such as we have now, therapists, but we did have the Methodist minister. So Mother sent me to see Reverend Cotton, and he sat with me with the Bible, and he would ask me different questions, and I would give him answers, and he would always look it up in Scripture and say, yes, that's right, that's right.
And did you ever wonder how you knew?
He had an inkling, because he was a really spiritual person himself. So finally he patted me on the head and said, honey, there's nothing wrong with you. I'll tell your mother everything's okay. But don't tell anyone when you have these ideas. So it all went underground. It all went underground.
How long did it go underground?
Several years.
Now, did it stay underground to you all together?
All together, really. I did have precognitive experiences, but I tried to push them away because they had gained some disapproval for me. And of course, one thing none of us want is disapproval.
Especially in our formative years, exactly.
So I kept a lot of it to myself. However, I did write journals. I was a good diary writer even then.
That's smart.
You know, a lot of it was in my diaries. But then later, my family and I all moved to Southern California, which was a hotbed of spiritualism and all kinds of interesting things. And through a series of circumstances, I was led to a teacher who taught me about these, as he called, spiritual gifts.
Now, at this point in time, did your mother believe that you had extrasensory perception capabilities, or did she kind of poo-poo it and say, nah, it's not my daughter, you know?
Well, actually, it was a combination between my dad and my mother, because my father he was a really wonderful human being, the best, and he was Catholic. And he knew about the saints and the people who had gifts of prophecy, and so
really?
If I said anything, he would say to Mother, leave her alone, she's okay. So they kind of gave me support. There was never really any heavy-duty rejection.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was good.
Now, you went into training for this?
When I met this teacher, he was a Bermuda-born man who was trained by another teacher, spiritualist teacher, right here in New York City.
Oh, really?
Her name was Alma Stewart Jarrett, and she was one of the people that went into the courts to gain recognition for spiritualism as a religion.
As a religion?
It was incredible, yes. A lot of people don't know that spiritualism actually is a religion.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It is, yeah. In fact, if you went into your phone book, you probably under churches would find spiritualist churches listed.
Oh.
So he was my teacher for many years. He taught me how to use all these, what he called spiritual gifts. Because I could see the auras. You know, when I was teaching school, for instance, in Kansas, I could see the auras of the children. And I would know their needs. And I would know how to teach from their needs rather than from rote, you know, how reading, writing, and arithmetic and all that, it all came in, but I could teach from the needs of each one of the students.
It made, I'm sure the children excelled quite a bit with your capabilities, and they all wondered what happened to themselves after you left.
Well, I had some interesting experiences along that line, but primarily what was wonderful was that they always wanted to come to school. They didn't want to skip school because I was seeing their needs, you know, and responding to their needs and their education. So that was kind of a big time for me.
I can imagine.
Teaching. And then one day I was standing in front of my classroom, and a voice from out there said, you will no longer be teaching.
Oh, how nice.
And I heard this voice very clearly, and I had already signed my contract. So I took a deep breath and said, oh, yes, I will. But a series of events happened that took me fully into spiritual work.
Would you like to share them with us, or?
I studied for the ministry. First, I began seeking. My teacher, the first teacher, sent all of his students to hear the great metaphysicians of California, Los Angeles. So I was sent to hear Ernest Holmes.
Oh, really?
Yes, and he became one of my teachers. I was sent to hear Neville. I was sent to hear Bitzer, Hornaday, all the great ones out there in Southern California. Ernest Wilson, founder of Unity, or not founder, but, you know, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were the founders, but Ernest Wilson was a big Unity minister out there. And so I was sent to hear all of these great metaphysicians. And through that, I gradually began to evolve this feeling that that's what I was. I just didn't know what to do with it.
Well, when did you finally decide what to do with this talent?
I kept being guided. I do believe there is a power for good in the universe that's greater than we are, and that it guides us and directs us.
I agree with you.
And the guidance was really intuitive. more than psychic by far. It was intuitive. And there is a big difference between the psychic and the intuitive.
Can you explain the differences?
The psychic nature has more of a level of, well, it even in a way comes from curiosity, in a way. Although many people are very psychic and they trust it and they get a certain level of information. And it's usually trustworthy, but not always, whereas intuition is always trustworthy. The inner knower, I call it. And it usually comes from you're listening to the very first thought that you have.
It's like always take the first answer that comes to your mind when you take an exam.
Right, that's it. Or hunches. You know, when you have a hunch, listen to it, because it is a level of intuition that's working for you.
I wish I could have a hunch of what numbers to play for the lottery, but all right.
Well, a lot of people would like to do that. And a lot of people have asked me if I do that, but I consider these spiritual gifts to be sacred, and so I do not use them to pick numbers for the lottery. Sorry about that.
That's right. You mentioned Ernest Holmes, and I was introduced to his works way back when. It's been in the past few years, I would say, that I've really become more attuned to this. Now, he wrote the book Science of Mind, and it seems like all the books that are following seem to be derivatives of his book, all right? How do one pick the right book to read or study or go into?
This is where intuition comes in.
Okay.
You listen to what your mind is telling you intuitively rather than logically. Okay. One of my favorite ways to choose a book is just to hold it.
Hold it?
I pick it up off the bookshelf in the bookstore, I hold it for a minute, and it's the inner knower says either put it down or yes, you can buy this one. But that's me. I can't say that everybody can do that. There is an old expression that comes out of Scripture that I believe is valuable here. By their fruits ye shall know them. So is the book contributing to a more joyful, productive, fulfilling life? Then it's your book for that moment in time. So you build your spiritual library this way. Science of Mind is a really great beginning.
Oh, it's a phenomenal book.
Really, yes.
I mean, it's like awesome. Well, you wrote several books.
Yes, I have done a little writing here and there.
Okay, Passing the Torch, let's see, Passing the Torch, The Way of the Avatar.
Yes.
Is one of them. All right. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that book is really out of my heart. I really feel privileged to have been able to be a part of bringing that book in. There was a point when I began to know that I was connecting with higher minds in an invisible world, in another dimension. And one of them was Rabindra Matori, a beautiful teacher who came from the higher dimension and who dictated every word in that book. Right.
Okay, so you were at the table writing?
Pardon?
You were at the table or your typewriter?
No, I spoke the words for him.
You spoke the words for him.
You've heard, no doubt, of Jane Roberts and Seth.
No.
No?
No.
Well,
please enlighten me, though.
That's okay. Jane Roberts was really a wonderful, we call, channel. And she had a being of light that came to her. His name was Seth. And she did some magnificent books.
Yes, I have.
The Nature of Personal Reality and quite a few others. Well, it's the same method, except my teacher, who's Rabindra Matori, and some others that come along from time to time, Rabindra just dictates commentaries. I receive an impression through the right side of my head. Okay. We make an appointment for these experiences. Like I made an appointment to come and be with you today, right?
Right.
Okay, so he and I make this appointment, and we have a tape recorder going, and there's usually one other person present, maybe 2 or 3, but at least one. And I just go into a quiet state. I become less in charge of my own conscious mind, so to speak. I kind of set it aside a little bit. He dictates. It's recorded, transcribed, edited, and printed. Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting. How did you feel when you were doing this?
I felt wonderful, because I always felt elevated after any channeling, and I still do this kind of channeling. But I feel elevated, I feel inspired, because the energy is so beautiful when it's coming in. Now, how does someone on the 4th dimension, or the higher dimensions, know more than we do? they've walked the path before us.
Okay. Let me ask, well, brings a lot of questions to mind now, because I want to hear more about the avatar, and I also want to talk about the fourth dimension.
Okay.
So which would you like to address first?
Well, I'd like to address the subject of the word avatar itself, because
Okay.
it's a very interesting word. It really means divine manifestation, such as Buddha or Jesus Christ, Krishna, and so on. But there came a point, apparently, in our evolution where we needed more than once every 1,000 or 2,000 years to have an avatar. So there is a great movement now to have all of us become avatars. But this means to become bearers of good news, doer of good deeds,
I like that.
friendship. I saw the most wonderful thing coming up here. There was this tiny little lady she was just sort of walking along, and she dropped a paper, an orange paper, maybe it was a bus ticket, I don't know what it was, and a man was walking by in a hurry, very well-groomed, fine-looking gentleman, and she asked him if he would give her the paper. He stopped, he picked the paper up, this little ticket or whatever it was, handed it to her, touched her on the shoulder, and said, "Now take good care of it."
Wow.
It was wonderful. Now that is being, in that moment of time, of an avatar, a doer of good deeds.
And nobody would believe the story, especially for New Yorkers.
I saw it with my own eyes.
So that's, oh, I see. Now
Actually, I find New Yorkers to be very considerate. Back to the word, avatar. It really is being oriented toward a higher understanding of yourself and each other,
That's lovely.
a deeper understanding.
I like that.
Yeah.
Let's go on to fourth dimension, because I shared with you at some point in time some of the visions that I've had when I was meditating, and you said that they were fourth dimensional. Now, please explain what's first, second, third. I guess we're in third dimension.
We're third, heading into fourth.
Heading into fourth.
Yes, a lot of us are moving back and forth between the third and fourth. That's one of my big problems. Is, a few years ago, I said, I want to live 80% on the fourth dimension and 20 here. Oops.
Oh,
I
really?
had to correct that. But your experience is okay, to explain the dimensions, we are in the third.
Okay.
If you want to go back to the first, it's probably the mineral kingdom.
All right.
Okay, and you would go to the second, and possibly that would be the plant kingdom. And the third has the animals and humans, right?
Okay, so that's when they say you talk to the plants and they'll grow.
Right, right,
Okay.
right. And then you go into the fourth, and that's where more of the angelic presences reside. Masters who have already been here and evolved to another dimension. Maybe they've been there for thousands of years. And then you go into another kingdom, and there are the angels, the angelic kingdoms are there. So you can go on as high as you want to go, all the way up to, my understanding is the 13th dimension is about it for planet Earth right now.
13
That's a long
different
way,
dimensions.
isn't it?
Well, I'm just getting into fourth, but what's interesting is I have not had those sensations or those experiences. Again, I had them 3 in a row, and then they haven't come back. And they were exciting. I want them to come back.
You want more?
I want more.
What were some of them?
The first one was strange. It was like a bunch of, I'm not sure if they were pigeons or if they were doves. And they were landing on a tile rooftop, almost like a Mediterranean or Spanish or something, and it was so clear. It was crystal clear. It's gorgeous. Then I had a man who had the same coloring hair as you did, and he was leaning on a balcony, and he kind of looked over his shoulder to the right, and he just looked at me, and he was just looking. And the third one was a woman, either on a piano or a box, an upright piano, and she was kind of like spread out. It was very seductive, and she was wearing a plain sheath, and her hair was almost in a Buster Brown shape. And that was it. And those are the 3 impressions I've had.
And were they at separate times?
3 different times. 3 different days. It was...
Well, if you read the last chapter in the book, you know the avatar bird.
Right.
Okay, so it appears that you were entering that realm of the birds that are the symbol of the avatar. One of the interesting things is a great way for the higher dimension to... Oh, there's a storm in New York today,
Sounds
right?
like it. You're right.
One of the great ways that the people from the higher dimensions can manifest is they'll drop a feather. And you'll think it came from a bird, you know, and here's this feather right in front of you. And
Oh, interesting.
So that's, we call that one of the symbols of the avatar. And when you think of how many different varieties there are and what really magnificent creatures they are, and you notice there's a bird on the cover of, of Passing the Torch. So the dimensions are very real, and we can move in and out of them through meditation. And as far as your second dream is concerned, it seems that you really are experiencing a variety of levels of consciousness. So they're all you expressing in some way.
Does this say that, are these things that are going to be happening in the future that I'm going to see on the third dimension, or not at all?
Not necessarily. You might, but not necessarily.
You wrote the book Passing the Torch in '81. Have you written other books since?
Yes, quite a few, as a matter of fact, but they haven't coming out, however, called Vortex of Fire.
What's that about?
It's about evolution of consciousness and how channeling happens, how the fourth dimension contacts us, and how we respond to them.
Did you ever find that you were in a situation where you had a premonition about something besides your father dying that...
it was my grandfather.
Oh, his grandfather,
right,
sorry.
Go ahead. That's all right.
That you could help somebody? And did you or didn't you?
Yes. Recently.
Oh.
Perhaps one of the most dramatic experiences of my life. I was seeing people by private appointment, and a young couple came in Zurich, came to see me. Her brother had just been killed in an automobile accident, and she was in great grief. So I worked with her and her husband. She didn't speak very good English, so it was difficult.
A challenge.
Appointment, yes, a challenge. And I started having this message from the next world that said, help my friend, help my friend. And I thought, well, this is his sister. Why is he saying, help my friend? So as they were getting ready to leave, she said, by the way, is there anything you can do, say, for me to say to the man that was driving the car when my brother died? When my brother died, he feels he is a murderer.
Oh, my.
Oh, my.
Oh, I got goosebumps.
Yeah. So, and, you know, so they said, we're having lunch with him. He's only 30 minutes from here. And I said, bring him here. Right now, bring him here. So they did. They went and got him and brought him. And lovely, wonderful young man who really felt he had killed his friend because they had both been drinking, and he was driving when the accident occurred. The man sat with me and held my hand and really said, help me. So the friend from the other world, who's dead in this world, said, tell him I was going to go anyway.
Oh.
Oh. So I said, this man who died was going to go anyway. He was finishing his life cycle, which was only 27 years.
That's short.
He was going to go anyway. And I saw in my inner vision, and I don't call it psychic vision, I call it inner vision. I saw that there was a man who was going to shoot him, dead.
Oh, jeez.
So I told this young man, if he hadn't died in the automobile accident, he would have been shot to death. And the young man is still holding to my hand for dear life. He said, oh my God. He said there was a man who was really angry with him, and he had a gun. And I got him out of the club.
Oh my God, I got goosebumps from top to toe.
And took him away. But he said, why did he have to, he was my best friend. I said, well, do you feel like it might have been better for him to die with his best friend or to be shot to death by a stranger who would have served a life sentence? Well, that just completely eased this darling young fellow of his feeling that he had been a murderer. That was very, very dramatic for me.
I can see.
And even now, I mean, tears come in my eyes to realize I've said if I hadn't seen anyone else on the whole trip, that one young man, the trip was worth it.
I'd say so.
And so he's restoring his life, realizing that he didn't do this, that it was his friend's plan. And there are plans. People come in with plans.
Which
I know you want to know what yours is.
Right, I'd love to know. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Well, I can tell you one thing. You're going to live a very long, a very happy, and a very fulfilling life.
Well, thank you. Do you know what my mission in life is?
Doing what you're doing.
Oh, all right.
And doing it bigger and better.
I like that.
Yeah. getting the word out to people about the beauty of the spiritual life is a great mission now. Not the religious life. That's already being taken care of by the churches, you know.
Right.
The spiritual life. And the women's connection, which is really incredible. Women are realizing their abilities now.
They're finally coming into their own.
They're coming into their own. Having greater realizations about their spiritual life and about what they can do in the world. You know, this I guess it's tomorrow night, I'm going to be meeting with some women who are New York executive women. And I got a little nervous about it, to be honest about it. I thought, what can I say, you know? And I realized, well, they've gone all the way up the ladder. But what they haven't discovered is that the ladder goes higher. So that's what I'm going to talk about.
Oh, excited. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. So we all have to know that, don't we? That the ladder goes higher. So you're here with your program to put that word out. That people can really discover themselves in different ways. And I think this is a wonderful mission.
I enjoy it. I've never been happier in my life.
Good.
Somebody wanted to get in touch with you. How would they get in touch with you?
Post Office Box 1662, Ojai, which is spelled O-J-A-I, California, which is where I live now, 93023, and my phone number is area code 805-646-0072.
And, one other thing. How can somebody get the book?
They can go to any metaphysical bookstore and ask for it. It is published by Still Point Publishing out of New Hampshire. And it's carried by most big catalogs like E.P. Dutton. If the store says it's out of print, they're wrong.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you
I'm
very
glad
much.
to have you.
A pleasure.
And thank everybody else for joining us. What are you going to do about your little voice in the back of your head? Are you going to pay attention to it now? Thank you for joining us again. I'm Barrie Switzen. I would love to hear from you. It's because of people like you that keep people like me on the air. So please write Barrie-Louise Switzen, The Woman's Connection, Ansonia Station, Post Office Box 918, New York, New York, 10023. See you soon. Bye.